I always wanted to serve on a jury.
I'm really super excited to be here, so I really appreciate you having me. I'm looking forward to it.
I want to give a big shout out to the 13th Jury Podcast and Brandi.
Yeah, I applaud you guys. Keep doing what you're doing.
And then I just look to the jury, and it's sort of like, look.
Hey, if you're bored of work, come pop in and say, hey, want some coffee?
You are a ray of sunshine, and I love what you've done with your YouTube channel.
After nearly 5 years, the trial of Michelle Troconis is finally set to start this week. Now, if you're not familiar with the case, I did put out a video with all of the background information, basically everything, all of the craziness that led up to the arrest of Michelle Troconis and Fotis Dulos. Now, this video is specifically going to focus on the information that we have about the day that she went missing. This trial has been called, or this case has been called, like the Gone Girl case, or as you see on my thumbnail, the Gone Mom case. The reason it's called that is because there is a movie, a Lifetime movie called Gone Mom, about Jennifer and her life and her disappearance. But also, that all came from the attorney that used to represent Fotis before his passing, and he actually even tried to insinuate or accuse her of disappearing because she just wanted to punish Fotis. It's ridiculous. It makes no sense, but it's what happened, and that's how a lot of people know this trial. Now, she was officially pronounced dead in October, but this is the first trial that we are going to actually watch, because the trial for Fotis, of course, never happened because he attempted to commit suicide through carbon monoxide poisoning, and he lasted a couple days in the hospital before he was taken off life support. And then there's also another trial for Kent Malheny, and that one has not happened yet. So this is the first of the trials that we'll actually be able to watch and see what happens. So this is a breakdown of everything that happened that day. So let's go over a detailed timeline of everything that happened, starting with the night before Jennifer went missing. So this is May 23rd of 2019. Video footage captures Fotis arriving home in his truck at 4:51 p.m. Powell then leaves his house where his office is, and he travels to the Mountain Springs home. Now, I'll be referring to this as the work house to kind of keep it a little bit easier, but this is the house that's on Mountain Springs Road. It's only a couple miles from his home where his office is. So on the way there, Powell is driving his red Toyota Tacoma, and the Ford Raptor is being driven by Fotis. So they leave the Tacoma at the workhouse. They ride back together in Fotis's truck, and they're seen leaving that driveway at 5:01 p.m. It only takes them a couple minutes to get back to the house, and then they are there for a few minutes before Powell actually leaves for the evening in Fotis's truck. The OnStar actually shows that it was shifted into drive at 5:10 p.m. About 10 minutes after Powell leaves, there are two phone calls, one at 5:21 and one at 5:23 on Kent Malheny's phone, and it shows him near Fotis's house or the Forge Group offices. Remember, it's all in the same spot. Now, the cell tower that is used to direct these calls is the same cell tower that is used for calls that are made at this house. So we can determine that his phone, at least, is somewhere right in this area. So fast forward about another 10 minutes from that. Fotis is seen on camera leaving his house in the Suburban at 5:32 p.m. At the same time that he's leaving, he makes a phone call to Kent's phone. Now, he drives to the workhouse, and it shows that he stays there for about 7 minutes, and then the Suburban is seen pulling out at 5:41. Now let's talk about the morning of Jennifer's disappearance. Fotis's alarm goes off early at 5:20 a.m. and he turns it off at 5:21 a.m. He's seen leaving on video surveillance, leaving the Mountain Springs work project home at 5:35 a.m. in the red Tacoma. So the Tacoma is seen on surveillance driving south toward Jennifer's house. Meanwhile, Michelle's preset alarm goes off at 6:40 a.m. The cameras that catch the Tacoma are at rest areas closer to Jennifer's house. So we're not exactly sure of the exact moment that the Tacoma arrived at Waveney Park, but we do know that it wasn't there yet at 7:05. There was a bus that drove by, and that video footage shows that that space was empty. Now, it had to be sometime not long after that when Fotis arrived and parked the Tacoma, got the bike out, and then biked to Jennifer's house. There is footage at 7:31 of somebody on a bike in dark clothing with a hood, like a hoodie kind of pulled up over them. And it's on the route that he would have taken to get to Jennifer's house. And it's at about the time he would have been passing that area. So it was 7:31 a.m. Now, also during this time, 7:29 until 8:22 a.m., the 4-group office location shows Kent has his phone at the location. So it shows that he is at the office, which matches up to what we had heard about him being there for a meeting. The 7:40 and 7:57 video surveillance from the buses show that the Tacoma was still parked at those times. And we know, of course, that Jennifer arrived back at her house at 8:05. So let's look at that time frame when Jennifer arrives at 8:05, and then the next sighting is when her Suburban is seen pulling out of the driveway at 10:25 a.m. This is the time when we believe that Fotis attacks Jennifer. He kills her in the garage. He places her body and a bike in the Suburban and then attempts to clean up the evidence. Now, also during this time, remember, Kent's phone is still showing that it's at the office at Fotis's home. And at 8:24, there's a planned call that comes into Fotis's phone, which is still Fotis's phone is still at the office as well. He doesn't have that with him. There's a planned phone call from a friend of Fotis's, a childhood friend that lives in Greece, and it lasts for 17 seconds. So that phone call was, I think, an attempt for him to possibly have an alibi to show, hey, I wasn't here. I was in my office. Didn't work, though. So the location data on Jennifer's phone shows that her phone was in this area where the Tacoma had been parked from 10:38 a.m. until 11:09. At 11:09, the phone shows that it was disconnected. Now, this is one of those things that because Jennifer's body has never been found, I tend to kind of overanalyze every single moment because every moment's crucial and we don't really know what's happening. So the estimated drive, according to Google Maps, is about 7 minutes from Jennifer's house to this area at the park. But the time lapse here is about 13 minutes. It could be nothing, but keep in mind, there is at some point going to have to be a body that is transferred. And one of the theories out there is that the Suburban was being driven by Kent and they possibly met up, and the Suburban that Fotis owned was used to transport the body. It's worth pointing out just because it is one of the theories that's out there. Now, he leaves the Suburban that belongs to Jennifer at the park with the lights running, the reverse, transmissions in reverse, and he leaves that there and then loads the bike in the Tacoma and heads back toward his home. Now, a different route was taken home. So there is more footage of the Tacoma going back north than there was of it coming down south, but it's caught at 11:12, 11:25, 11:40, and 12, and then it finally pulls into the workhouse at 12:22 p.m. Meanwhile, at Jennifer's house, the longtime friend / nanny shows up at 11:30 and she notices a few things. She notices that the Suburban is missing, which would be weird because she wouldn't expect Jennifer to take the Suburban into the city. She also notices that out of the 12 pack of paper towels that they bought, there's only 2 rolls left. She notices Jennifer's purse is on the floor in between the mudroom and the kitchen. She notices a granola bar and a mug of tea on the counter. A lot of things that aren't normally how they should be. And she also notices that the mudroom door is unlocked. So an hour and a half after the Tacoma is seen pulling into the workhouse, Michelle, according to the arrest warrants, Michelle pulls in driving the Jeep, and then Fotis pulls in right behind her driving the Suburban. Now, I made a note that there's not a time listed on the documents that I've seen that show anyone leaving the workhouse between the time that the Tacoma arrived and the time that Michelle and Fotis arrived. So that's also interesting. About 17 minutes later, a phone call is made from Fotis's phone to Michelle's phone. So I mentioned yesterday that there was a lot of back and forth with driving and taking different cars, and we didn't really go into detail, so I wanted to kind of break that down in this video. So according to the documents that I've seen, I didn't see any footage of the Jeep leaving, but there is footage at 2:01 of the Jeep pulling back into the workhouse from the direction of the home office. It's there for 23 minutes, and then the Jeep leaves again, going back toward the home office, and this time is gone for an hour and a half. Now, in the meantime, at 3:38 p.m., Fotis's phone is seen leaving the workhouse, and it arrives home 39 minutes later. Now, this is interesting because keep in mind, it's only a 2-mile drive, and you can see when the back and forth is happening and they're going back and forth from the workhouse to the home/office. It doesn't take long for them to get there at all. So for this to be a 39-minute drive, we don't really know where he was at. That's interesting. At 3:55, the Jeep returns to the workhouse, and then the Suburban, being driven by Michelle, leaves at 4:03 p.m. and then arrives back at the workhouse at 4:23 p.m. And then again, Fotis arrives at home with his phone at 4:17 p.m. A lot of back and forth. Now, something to note here is that the phones for Fotis and Michelle both showed that they remained back at the house, even though they were showing that they were both at the workhouse based on the surveillance. Now, at 4:58, there's footage of the Raptor, the truck, being driven by Powell, pulling into the workhouse. Now, keep in mind, Powell at this point, it's the end of the week. It's a holiday weekend. He's ready to go home. He went to Fotis's home where the offices are. His truck wasn't there. The keys weren't there. So he's calling. Of course, Fotis's phone isn't there, so he can't get an answer. So he has to go looking for him. He said that when he pulled into the driveway of the workhouse, that it seemed like Fotis and Michelle were really surprised to see him. I'm not sure why, because there was a phone call earlier that said that his ETA, the time he'd be back around, was going to be about 4:30. So they should have been kind of expecting him. He said that they said that they were there cleaning, but he noted that they weren't holding any cleaning products and they were out by their cars where there were no cleaning products. So while they said they were there cleaning, he wasn't really sure what was going on. So he gets there and they decide to head from the workhouse back to the home/office. So Powell pulls out first, and then the Suburban is seen talking at the end of the driveway to the Jeep, who had pulled out directly behind Powell. They're stopped for about 10 to 15 seconds. So it looks like they're communicating, but of course, we have no way of knowing what was said. After that, they follow each other all back to the house. Now, while they're at the house, Fotis goes in and grabs his phone that was left, and then he goes back outside. Michelle is staying at home, and the Jeep and the Suburban are both staying at home. Fotis gets in the driver's seat of the truck. Powell gets over in the passenger seat, and then they head back to the workhouse. So the Raptor is seen pulling into the workhouse at 5:14 p.m. Powell is in the passenger seat and Fotis is driving. About 2 minutes later, a phone call is made from Fotis's phone to Michelle's. Apparently, the key for the Tacoma was still at the house, so he calls and has her bring it. Now, it's worth noting too that it's on the notes for the interview with Powell that he said that at this point, Fotis didn't want to even call Michelle to get the keys. He told him, just go ahead and take my truck. Just take the Raptor and, take it for the weekend and we'll see you on Tuesday. And he said, no, it was a holiday weekend. He planned on transporting his dirt bike, so he wanted his own truck. So Fotis did make the phone call to Michelle, who then had to bring the key to the workhouse for Powell to get his truck. It's at 5:24 p.m. when cameras see Michelle in the Suburban pulling into the workhouse to bring the Tacoma keys to Powell. Now, it's only 3 minutes later, 5:27, when you can see Michelle exiting the driveway at the workhouse and leaving. And then just seconds later, Powell pulls out in the Tacoma. And at 5:28, just a minute later, we see the footage of Fotis pulling out of the workhouse. So now everybody has left this workhouse on Mountain Springs Road. At 7 o'clock, Jennifer was reported missing, and the search began for her, and they were able to pretty quickly find the Suburban that had been left in Waveney Park. Now, Fotis's phone location data shows him driving along Albany Avenue, which gave investigators the ability to locate the footage of he and Michelle dumping all of those trash bags in Hartford. Now, Albany Avenue is only about 10 miles, actually a little less. So there's an hour and a half gap where we don't have any information about where they were or what they were doing. The video also shows Fotis putting the FedEx envelopes with the altered plates into a storm drain at the corner of Albany and Adams Street. We lose sight of the truck around 7:50, but they are seen less than 10 minutes later entering a Starbucks and purchasing food and drinks before returning home at 8:10 p.m. So there's a lot of time that is unaccounted for. There are certain gaps of time that we really don't know anything about. Now, obviously, law enforcement has a lot more information than we do, and that's part of the reason that this is a murder conspiracy charge as opposed to just staying with the tampering charges. As a matter of fact, in the search warrant paperwork, which is extensive. It's about 460 something pages, I think. It's pretty long, but somewhere in there it says that this investigation has progressed. Detectives have identified several aspects which indicate a significant amount of pre-planning prior to this crime and a substantial effort on the parts of both Dulos and Troconis to tamper with and hide evidence of this crime. So the trial is starting, and we're going to hear a lot more information that we don't have, including some more of the data, some more of the time points that they have from the cell phone and OnStar and video surveillance. So there's still a lot more to come out, but this is a breakdown of everything that we have so far to kind of give you an idea of where we're at going into the trial. This is a trial that Jennifer's family and friends have been waiting on for a really long time. I'll be streaming the trial live daily on my YouTube channel, and if you don't have time to watch the whole thing, but you still want to keep up with justice for Jennifer, I'll be releasing video recaps with a breakdown of all of the courtroom happenings. So make sure you subscribe and turn on your notifications so that you don't miss any important updates. Again, my name is Brandi Churchwell, and thank you for watching. I'll see y'all next time.